broadband. I want him here.
I know. It's on my list to call today.
Well, let's roll.
Recording in progress.
All right, everyone. We're still waiting for one of our committee members, but it is 10:30 on Friday morning, July 30th, and we will go ahead and convene this meeting of the City of Topeka's Public Health and Safety Committee. Let's introduce the committee.
Councilwoman Christina Valdivia Alcala, District 2.
Karen Hiller, District 1, and as far as I know, we'll be joined shortly by Councilman Dobler from District 7. Thank you, those who are here live and who are online, for joining us this morning. We've got Scott Gowan and Monique Glaudet from the city and Carrie Delphs. So with that, let me call the meeting to order, and let's get the minutes approved from July 8th.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve. I will second. Any discussion, amendments? Otherwise, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. We will move right on to our first of two issues. We are addressing broadband today and property and premises. We did some homeless learning the other night at the council meeting, so I don't see anybody who's here in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I just wanted to make sure. All right, broadband. We've got a working team that has been working on these issues, and I will open it up to, I guess, to city manager as well as to team members, Lazone Graves and Scott Gowan for updates first, and then talking about whatever, Lazone and Scott especially, on whatever progress is happening on a plan after the updates. So not combine the two. City manager.
Okay. Probably the biggest update I have, we may talk further, we did get the Kansas Health Foundation grant. We talked about that, and progress is moving forward. I signed the grant agreement the other day, so that is now moving forward. And Monique and the group are working towards setting up the steps that they need to in order to hire the staff or train the staff that we're going to use for that, and all the processes they're doing there. I'll jump ahead to C in ARPA funding. I did, through my research that I continue to do in ARPA, there is a line that relates to being able to do some literacy training when it comes to, I call it technology literacy. So there is, once you see it, I do right now have a line item for some funding to give towards that, which then would augment, in my opinion, augment what's going to be done with the grant. And so there will be some more assistance that can be provided. We can't buy devices or things like that that might help people gain access, but we can do some different training and assistance with getting people knowledge on how to utilize their systems.
Can I stop you just for a second? Can everyone hear him? Somehow we either need some help with the mic or need you to talk a little louder.
I'll move closer and talk louder.
Okay.
I always worry talk too loud sometimes because of my command voice.
That's better, thank you.
But yes, so we do have some funding that's available through that program, through the ARPA fund, which I didn't think we were, but when I further researched it, it is listed as an option. Not as full-blown. Most of it is geared towards actually creating infrastructure, and it refers to infrastructure that is hardwire infrastructure, not any Wi-Fi capability or that type of thing for a neighborhood, which was mentioned last time. So that's where we're at. We're going to be able to do a little bit, but because our city is in a position that we do have with the connectivity being available in most, in all parts of the community, there's not going to be something that we need to do in that regard, but we'll be able to provide some assistance through some training stuff.
Just in case people missed it earlier, so what you said is that the ARPA money, you just said it's focused on hardwiring primarily, but it does allow what you're calling tech literacy as a use.
Correct.
Could you just thumbnail review what's in the Kansas Health Foundation grant?
It'd probably be better if Monique did that instead of me. given that she knows the details of that much
Just
more
so that
intricately.
we get focused on what we've got in hand. Monique?
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair and Councilmember Valdivia Alcala and everyone in attendance. So we were thrilled that we were one of 4 organizations in Kansas that obtained a $250,000 grant for digital equity and inclusion. And so the grant will be dispersed in a 3-year time period. So we'll receive $80,333.33 per year. And what that money is focused on is we earmarked it for our part-time digital community navigator and a part-time technical navigator, as well as marketing. And then there's a small section of it that will be available in year 2 and 3 that will be for some equipment. But for the first year, it's for hiring the 2 part-time navigators and for doing the educational workshops and technical workshops that the city manager referred to in the community. So our first year will be focused on marketing, informing everyone of the opportunities in the various programs.
Thank you for that. That
You're welcome.
helps to frame what's on the table. Councilwoman Valdivia.
I have a couple of questions, and these may be really broad questions that we're not ready to answer yet, but I want to get them out on the table. You said years 2 and 3, Monique, and can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Years 2 and 3, there might be some funds left for equipment,
Yes, ma'am.
but we don't have any idea right now. Will it be further down the road till we understand exactly how much will be budgeted for equipment?
Yes, and we'll be able to provide that information with you probably at the next meeting. I'd have to go back and dig through and look at the budget. We've earmarked a certain dollar amount, and the only reason that we earmarked a smaller amount is we're looking forward to partnerships throughout the community with various corporations and other organizations that would potentially donate their equipment to an outside vendor that will strip all the data and then reload some data and have that available. And so we're just not quite sure yet. I have a meeting to attend on August the 26th with KHF to learn a little bit more in regards to that and to see what other partnerships are available and what that looks like. So we will keep the committee apprised as we learn more information.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question would be, or I don't know, question, but I've been talking and there have been discussions in community about, and maybe it's already come up in this committee, about having hubs in underserved communities where digital literacy training can take place. So in other words, looking at Oakland, maybe there could be the Oakland Community Center, or maybe it could be Lundgren Elementary School. Also in North Topeka, maybe it could be somewhere like Pappin's Landing, and East Topeka, somewhere like Salvation Army. So I'm wondering when we start talking about these possibilities more, if someone could give me an idea.
Councilmember, I'd like to ask, is committee member Lizone Grays on the call?
Lozone is here, and our next item after the updates is to talk about where the group is on what the future plan is.
Okay,
And
wonderful.
maybe they
Hold it.
will either already address that, or they know you want to know about it. How's that? Because it's not part of, it doesn't sound like it's part of the grant. So this will be a good time.
That's good.
Other updates before we, okay. Well, let's go on then to Lizone and Scott. Scott is online, Lizone is here in person. Lizone, I don't know how you guys want to present, whether you want to tag team or Scott's it, huh? All right, well, Lizone, you know where the mic is if you need to, or even sit at the table if you need to join. Thank you. Scott, you're on.
If you don't mind, I'll start off with a summary that pretty much comes in right behind what the city administrator shared with you guys. Thank you for letting me appear today, and I appreciate the time of the councilwomen who are interested in this topic. I'll start a little bit with the KHF grant that we got. The focus of our grant activity was to get basically started with the resources that are available for our families today. We want to publicize the resources that are available through the FCC. We also want to make sure that the resources that are available in the community, that we can point our families in the directions that they need to go to be able to connect.
Scott, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Our tech person isn't in the room right now. If you can anyway get closer to a mic so you're a little louder.
How's that? Is it coming through clearer now, or I can even be like, I'm a
about the
teacher
same.
at heart. About the same?
That's better. Keep going. Thank you.
Okay. I'm a teacher at heart, so I don't mind being a little louder if that will help. So in short, the grant's focus was helping our community connect with the resources that are already available. The families in our community can work through the FCC's emergency broadband benefit, and at least two organizations, the library and of course Topeka Public Schools, are working together to also take advantage of the FCC's Emergency Connectivity Fund. And so we're trying to apply these resources and get this early start. And that's really what the grant was about, was getting a digital navigator in place, even though it's only a part-time for now, getting a digital navigator in place to help point our families in the right direction, and then getting a technical navigator in place in order to help them, once they have access to that resource, help them make that access work within their home. And so those two pieces of the puzzle come from the grant, but that's just the first step in our vision of where we'd like to go. And that is to help our families connect with those resources and get those things in place. Kind of the next step and what our current work is evolving around is, okay, what does that look like? We're producing a handbook for our the two new staff members in Monique's team, in order to make sure that they have the resources that they're going to need to be able to answer those questions and be able to point our families in the right direction. We're also working on a long-term budget that recognizes that these needs will evolve. At least right now, while we have the support of the FCC and we have the support of resources throughout the community, we have some of the pieces in place, but down the road that may not be the case, and we want to make sure that we have a sustainable model. In addition, as Monique said, we're trying to partner with a vendor to basically take devices from an organization like TPS, for example, and make those devices that are no longer useful for our students and staff at Topeka Public Schools, but to refurbish them and make them useful for the families and in their homes. And so those are the kinds of approaches that we're working on right now in order to do that next step. In addition, we've also been in conversation with a member of the county commission, I believe, it joined our organization. And we've been talking about some of the things where we have parallels between the city's needs and the county's needs, and then some of the things where the county's needs differ from our needs. You know, speaking back to the city administrator's comments, we're in a great position from a perspective of connectivity. We have vendors in our city that can virtually connect almost every home. But what we don't have is the affordability part. Well, the county, they're looking at a different picture. They have parts of the county that are not receiving connectivity. And so they're looking at that piece that he alluded to, that we wouldn't necessarily need to do at the city level. And so we've been kind of having those conversations as well. I will share that Topeka Public Schools has applied, as has the Shawnee County Public Library. We have applied for the Emergency Connectivity Fund, and that is an additional resource that is available to schools and libraries through the FCC in order to provide connectivity support in the home. So at the last time I spoke with this group, we were talking about how we would begin shifting the families that we had been supporting last year during the pandemic. We would be shifting them towards the emergency broadband benefit in order to encourage a better connection for them. We have begun that effort, but we've also decided to continue the effort that we had in place last year, where Topeka Public Schools did provide in-home internet for about 3,000 families who are eligible. And so those eligible families can continue to stay with us if they'd like, or they can continue to pursue the emergency broadband benefit, whichever they're more comfortable with. We we did this because even though we've been communicating it now for a little over 2 months, we've been communicating about the emergency broadband benefit. We still have over 3,000 of our families who have stuck with us and are continuing to use the broadband services that we placed in their home. And so we didn't want to abandon them. We want to continue to offer that. So we've applied to the Emergency Connectivity Fund in order to continue that effort. And in addition to that, we've also purchased some data plans for our existing fleet of hotspots. And I know that the Topeka and Shoshone County Public Library shared with us that they were going to continue a hotspot strategy as well, so that we don't leave any potential. We want to make sure that we have a lot of different ways to address the needs of our families this coming year. And I'll be glad to take any questions, but I know Lizone also wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about the use of the ARPA funds. And so I want to leave some time for him to do that as well.
Well, maybe since Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala raised the issue of hubs or hotspots, you could address her question from earlier?
Sure. So I think the question, as I understood it from Councilwoman Valdivia, was more about community centers, the community center strategy. That is part of our vision, and I believe I would classify that as our next step, part of our next step vision. We basically want to provide a training model or a support model that can be adopted in community centers, or, you know, we referred to Lundgren, we referred to some of the school facilities that may be available in different communities. And so the strategy behind that would be that we would partner with other organizations within the community, and they would say, hey, I'd like to do a training opportunity at this particular location. So some of the equipment that we had earmarked in the grant for years 2 and year 3 was intended to be equipment that could be used for presentation purposes, or equipment that could be used to help our families better learn some of the strategies that we do on the internet every day and take for granted, that they have not had the opportunity to do so because they hadn't had the connectivity yet in their home. And so we do plan to use community centers for that effort, and we do plan to partner with different community organizations to deliver those trainings and opportunities. That vision could take on anything from them applying to, like a community organization or a church applying for a strategy, and us supporting that in some way. It could also look like maybe our digital navigator and technical navigator might be invited by a community organization to an event that they're sponsoring in order to provide additional support in the context of that event. So that's kind of what we've been looking for as far as our vision goes at this point. Obviously, the additional funding that we can put towards additional FTEs in the area of both digital navigators and technical navigators is essential, because these 2 halftime people that we applied for with the grant are just a start. There is no way that we will be able to shift the adoption and shift the paradigm for those families without having some additional support. So this is really just a start. The grant was intended to kind of get us off in the right direction, and then of course rely on community partners and additional funding resources to be able to extend that impact.
If I can ask you to clarify for your group's focus, I'm thinking back to conversations we've had so far in this committee. Is your focus still on children and families and working in their own homes, or has it broadened out? Is anyone looking at the entire community? Kids who want to do homework outside their home or need to be connected someplace else, seniors connecting with their community center or with each other or their families. What's the focus? Is your group still just I mean, for good reasons, but focused on children and families in their own homes?
That is the near-term focus. Our year 2 focus is more centered on community centers. But at this time, the group has not taken up the mantle of a wide community-wide broadband effort, simply because we have connectivity in the community already. It's a matter of pointing our families in the direction of being able to get that in their homes, and then using common facilities as a strategy for teaching them how to do creative things with the internet in order to improve their financial situation, to improve their access, to improve their employment situation.
Okay, let me hand the baton back to you on that subject.
No, I'm good. I mean,
Okay.
I would hope that, you know, the process, when we get to the point where this becomes a community-driven initiative for these hubs, that the hubs organizations, like you said, might be given a chance to apply, or that you, obviously, the goal would be to seek out the most potent locations where the flow of traffic, where familiarity within the community is known by the neighborhood. So thank you for that. Thanks for the update.
No problem.
Thanks. I guess I keep thinking back to the kids who may have the connectivity at home but are sitting on the curb outside the school anyway, that we knew about. For, you know, if there's a reason why maybe too much noise or congestion or whatever, that just being at home isn't successful, or if there's more than one home for that young person and only their primary one is wired and otherwise they're not covered. Uh-oh, you got your finger up. Good.
Yeah, no. That's exactly a key point. So when I was putting together the application for the Emergency Connectivity Fund, I specifically thought about those situations where we were only addressing the student's home. There may be some additional support that we can provide, either through the Emergency Broadband Benefit, which is available to anybody throughout the United States who qualifies, or to use our hotspots, by having these unlimited hotspots that we've applied for through the ECF. By having them with unlimited data, we'll be able to serve more of those situations where the student has either a variable home or where the student has some additional needs outside of their specific home.
And right now you're addressing that pretty much on a student-by-student basis,
Correct, yeah.
which means you have to know.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just thinking of the real world out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. Mike, do you have anything to add from DCF?
I do have a question.
Introduce yourself since.
Mike Siebert, I'm a Regional Resource Coordinator with DCF. A couple of questions. One is, I know Lozone has been at Impact Avenues, and they're looking to start up next month. Is that one of the areas that you're looking to be involved with? And then the second one is, what about shared custody of parents? Are they able to have two different accesses as far as getting to the internet?
So through the emergency broadband benefit, a family that finds themselves in the situation while the district was only able to provide it to one household when we were initiated in that process, the emergency broadband benefit is available nationwide for families that qualify. And so that can also work in those situations where one household, the primary household, might have our benefit, and then the other household that the student is shared with might have the emergency broadband benefit. So there's a couple different ways to achieve that. And of course, barring anything else, at least for the short term while they're getting those things worked out, they're welcome to use our hotspots so that we can make sure that the student does have the connectivity.
And so those that are like with Impact Avenue that are homeless,
Yes.
is there a plan to work with them as well?
Yes, there is, because our homeless population has been our primary target with our more flexible connections through our hotspots. We've mostly worked with our homeless families and our families that are in transition, trying to get the new services put into their home. So the hotspots are checked out through our libraries and basically made available to get the immediate need, and then and like I said, once they connect up, then we get them back. Or in the case of our homeless families, we check them out to them for the extended duration.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Is there more to share about what's happening with Impact Avenues? The connection? It's good to hear.
Lazone, you might be able to better speak to that since you participated in that. I have not, unfortunately.
Lazone Grays. I'm one of the Topeka Digital Equity Partner members. As it relates to the Impact Avenues, which really focuses on the homeless youth and their parents. One thing about the EBB is that homeless are eligible. One of the things is that they often need a mailing address. And so, as I promoted before, and I think that once the Digital Navigator comes on board, there's a lot of information and resources that I can share because I personally know this over the years, so that we can find out. Our organization can be a mailing address because they have to have some type of a place for them to mail that hotspot. If you go to the PCs for People website, which also is a part of the EBB that does the hotspots and our wired service, they can accept, they are in the EBB, they can provide a hotspot for homeless populations, but they have to have a mailing address, for it to come to. One of the problems that is known is a lot of the ISPs really aren't into the position to provide the computer, because you had to sort of get the computer to get a rebate. And so there's not really a very structured process of, they're eligible for a computer and internet, but the computer is really discounted. So first off, you have to purchase it, and then from an actual ISP provider, and Megan can probably clarify that for me as an ISP. So I think that there's some things that needs to be hashed out, fleshed out for that from the homeless perspective. From the one of the things that wasn't mentioned is before the EBB even, the agreement that DCF has where they will actually purchase a computer or internet for those recipients who are receiving particular services eligible for it. TANF, food assistance, and the GOLDS program. So I'm hoping that after we get started in probably getting to Councilwoman Alcalas and your notion, Councilwoman Hiller, I would propose some type of a digital equity summit, so therefore we can bring these stakeholders and all those who are interested in knowing what's going on to the table, those who have something to bring to the table, already to the table, and so that we can really start getting a beat on all of the resources and things that are available. And once the Digital Navigator and Tech Navigator is brought on board, I can help get them plugged into the resources of national practitioners through the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, because a lot of this is already, the framework is already done, but I'm probably the only person in Topeka that has the full-blown knowledge, of most of it. And I'm looking forward to passing that knowledge on so that those individuals can better access the information and be of service here. And when we get to the ARPA funds, I can probably express a little bit more.
And so just to kind of pull that together, that makes a whole lot of sense. With the timeline for the hiring of these two individuals, when would you be, October? What realistically might be a timeline for that summit? I'm thinking of the aging people, for instance, and when I asked about the full community and community members, that would give everybody a chance to be at the table. Here's state of the art in terms of what y'all have figured out and the models that are available, and then to either figure out if we're covered or if we need more partners or more assistance. We might not, but if we do, at least we can identify what that is and fill it in.
Well, I'll let Monique or somebody speak to that timeline of those individuals there. But when you get to the Digital Equity Summit, I think that is a very important part of it. And I think that even within the the brief that the Kansas Health Foundation read out, that community planning and community outreach of bringing people to the table so that we have to sort of put together a community plan. And I'm going to just sort of use your minutes from 9/14/2020, where Gina Millsap had mentioned that that the hope was a community-based plan would emerge from the process to identify the gaps and disparity issues. I think we've done that. This is less of a technology issue and more of a social equity issue. That having correct devices is as important as having broadband, and some of the takeaways came from this discussion group that got right back to the need for a community-based plan. This is a committee of people who have been meeting and speaking and got us this far. But without that input from the community, we have ideas, I have ideas, I have a lot of ideas. But
Okay, we like
there
that.
No, Lizzo.
are other knowledgeable people, like relying on Councilwoman Alcala, that she knows the location, a better potential location in Oakland or North Topeka that I could ever have. If those who know their neighborhood knows what the location is, I have a good indicator of what I would like to foresee. I think I had shared there was a project, a Wi-Fi project in Central Topeka with neighborhood Andy Fry. He was, and Carl Fundenberger, that they had put something together. So there may be some things out there that's already going. What is it that they need? Where's their vision at? Summit would bring those people who have a direct interest and entities like DCF, because not knowing where we will be 6-9 months from now, and then having some of those facilities like in Lundgren, the Gil Carter Initiative, in North Topeka, in Central Topeka, so we can better identify where can these young people and their parents and adults who don't have children but are in job training programs or are working on things. If
Exactly.
it is 100-some degrees right now and it's not even 12 noon, people would have to leave in that neighborhood in Highland Acre to come downtown to catch a bus, get a transfer, and go somewhere. That's why we're trying to set up centers and locations in the neighborhoods where some of the life skills, job club, programs and things that are very valuable to low-income adults will be directly in the neighborhood. And that's a part of, while they're in the building, they can learn about EBB and other resources and different things available. So,
Well, that's why I was asking in general when that would come, because it seems like a natural progression and a good time to pull everyone together.
Yes.
I think Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and I both, I'll never forget we both served on the, well, I think you did last year. The Social Service Grant Committee had a meeting about just the senior centers and senior services. And what they talked about was, COVID related, all these seniors were at home needing to learn the tech, needing to, for their socialization, for exercise, for all those things that, and we weren't talking about them at all. So I certainly hope that they are all included in the invitations, as well as, we can get to the list of everybody we invited. Also, we had a visit from Maren Turner from AARP here, offering that they were eager to be involved and also have some resources
Yes.
that they could bring to the table. And she is just now taking a new position, so it would be she's leaving at the end of next week, so there'll be a shift in management there. There will still be interim people at AARP, but I would encourage us not to overlook them, both for their range of connectivity as well as money when the time comes. And there may be other full networks that Councilwoman's thinking of or that others will bring. So
well, there's, I've
workforce
learned,
network, for instance.
yes, I understand that, there are left hands and right hands and middle hands, and they're not working together. There's state resources, federal resources, city resources, potential county resources, not trying to get all of the resources from one any particular body.
Right.
But there is a way of everybody has an equal share and an equal stake in the success, and to rolling out something that it's not just this year or 3 years, it's 5 and 7 years. Where do we want to be when funds that we have now to build and other funds that may be coming in, rolling out? And there's some other legislation, even within this new infrastructure plan, that if passed, is going to give a great benefit to addressing digital equity. So some of the things that we may not be able to do with certain funds, that will cover it, and dialoguing with the state. The state has a lot of monies as well through the ARPA that they'll be able to allocate and use for that. And I will, just for the record, I did actually inquire to the Treasury Department about if digital literacy could be used, if the ARPA funds could be used for digital literacy, and they sent me the final interim ruling and a frequently asked questions. So I will just give that here. I ran out of printer ink, so I can give it to someone. You can make copies and share it with whomever, but I think it clearly helps identify that the funds can be used for digital literacy training and such. And I think clearly it said internet access. So I know that, yes, broadband, wireline can be done, but it seemed like the state is going to get a lot more money and some other entities to do bigger things of that nature there. That one of the biggest things is that people need to have the ability of going online, having a unit, and knowing how to use that unit to effectively go online to jobs, telehealth, communicating with doctors, teachers, family, elderly, all of that. So there's going to be a great learning curve. I have a lot that I want to share and get the digital navigator plugged in so that they become the guru to this knowledge.
Well, something that has struck me, and I guess that you guys are probably way ahead of me on this, but basically, this is a new utility. Sort of like when somebody invented electricity. You know, this is a new utility, so we're not planning just emergency fallback. What we're really doing, or what you're really doing, is planning, envisioning a permanent utility, a network for our community, and it's exciting, and I'm interested in that, but I am also really appreciative of the vision that you have and how you're doing, and I'm real happy that your work team is doing this hard work for us, and it looks like you're doing it just right. So please know that anything from me is just a let's not forget or a question, but you guys we're counting on you. Oh, said enough for Scott to put his finger up, so.
And I wholeheartedly agree with your analogy of this being a utility. It's an emerging civil right. I mean, we're talking about a disparity that exists in our society, and we can solve that. We can reach a point, you know, with this momentum and with this effort and with these resources, we can reach a point where we can lower that disparity. We can reach a point where we can have people, you know, again, we take for granted what we do on the internet every day, whether it's buying our car insurance or whether it's, you know, all the things that we can do, we take it for granted. But there are many that cannot do that simply because they don't have the connectivity, they don't have the knowledge of having done that before, and they don't have the intergenerational support and resources that we've all taken for granted.
Yeah. Sure. Councilwoman?
A question or a comment for Scott and then a question for Lizone. Scott, the booklet that you're talking about that you're going to be developing, that will also be in Spanish?
Well, the handbook is intended for the digital navigator and for primarily it's intended for the digital navigator and the technical navigator to make sure that they know all of the resources that are available in this constant working document.
Okay.
But absolutely, we want any outreach that we're doing, we want any resources, any print materials, any sort of support resources. We actually want that to be, we could go ahead and say biliterate because that's going to be our first two languages, right? English and Spanish are going to be our first two languages. But we ultimately want it to be accessible to everyone in our community. Even if that does mean that we need to get translators or additional support from other community partners to be able to reach into the homes that may not even speak English or Spanish.
Right.
And so that's kind of the goal behind that. But again, the handbook is largely a steering document that our community partnership groups that have been working towards this are basically arming our digital navigator and technical navigator with, so that they have the benefit of the things we would think about within our own internal organizations. I know I've got a lot to contribute on the technical side, being the Chief Information Officer at Topeka Public Schools. I want to make sure that they have the knowledge that my team has, so that when they run across an issue, they're supported.
Okay, thank you. And then Lizone, The summit that you're talking about, I mean, what is your thoughts about how soon the summit needs to be looked at or seriously considered?
Well, again, I'm just sort of, I think the grant starts August 1st, but it's going to take time to get people
You
on.
need the navigator and the tech navigator on
Yeah,
board first.
and
right?
hopefully, be a part of the planning, because I participated in 2 digital digital inclusion summits, Kansas City, and of course being a part of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. So I will be able to share I don't throw anything away. I have the booklet, the framework. I have the people who've done it before. I can get them plugged in. A mentor. I am having ability of providing a mentor from national level for the digital navigator here. So it's not just learning from me. And if a person has a question that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we can just sort of share what works. So I'm going to wait for the group on our next meeting to see where they want to go from there. And hopefully, once we get that digital navigator in, I will spend all the time that I have making the connection, sharing her. I think that she should speak with Angela Seifer, who's the executive director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. KC Digital Drive, which was also an award recipient of these funds here. I worked very close with them all the way up into the point when we bought Google Fiber to Greater Kansas City. And so there are people that I can get people plugged into to work with. So I really don't know, but I would hope that within a couple of months after that digital navigator is on board, that we can start planning and having something.
I was throwing that out to push you, but actually, realistically, if you're maybe not hiring till September and you want to get them trained and so on, we might be talking December. If there's enough time then for those navigators to get their feet on the ground, get familiar, and organize it themselves.
Yeah.
Any answer was okay. Scott?
I actually like the fact that you're encouraging some speed with this, because some of these programs will have a shelf life, and the sooner that we can take advantage of the programs that are available to us, I think the better.
And one final note on the EBB, and I have to look into it more. I think that there are some entities who are with cell phones that EBB can actually be used for cell phones. So when we're talking about that homeless population, there are some, I think that there's an opportunity for that. Not that it replaces a device, but we're talking about the homeless population that sometimes the cell phone is what they have.
Well, but I remember working with a young lady who was a 501 student who was trying to do a major college. It was an application that I was involved in linking her with on her phone because her tablet was at school and school wasn't open. I mean, cell phones are important. Well, thanks. I mean, since there won't be a lot, Scott, of planning need to be done, since Lizone has all the templates, then. Well, we will stay tuned. This is exciting, and it gives us enough of a picture, I think, of where you're going. Could you briefly just make sure we refresh before we close up this part with who's actually active on your work group?
I will have to pull up the calendar item to get all the names for sure. But we got Michelle Stubblefield from Go Topeka, Monique, and the name is escaping, Latoya from her team. We've got the aging. Okay, Lizone, you're gonna have to do the
Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging.
Yes.
And
we got the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library.
Public Housing. The Housing Authority.
Okay.
I think he said the Public Library. What we're missing?
And housing credit counseling.
Yes.
Yes. And we also added, the last time we added a representative from the county commission to join us. And I'm trying to think of who else has been active with us. For anybody we forgot, I apologize.
Okay, well, that helps because we've had different people on at different times, and that way we've kind of got a scope. And at this point, you do not have the providers on that group, but might at some point. Is that?
Yes,
Yeah, it's
correct.
conceivable. I think at this point it was more or less designing the initiative and the strategies behind it, and with our next phase of shifting from the individual households, getting them going, into our next phase of getting community centers going. I think it's going to be essential that we have some other voices in that space at that time.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Here is, I
Is there-
sent a copy for the federal regulation for digital equity.
Okay.
I'll just leave it here for, and you can make copies for whomever.
Why don't you give it to Liz?
Okay.
I'd like a copy.
Now, we already had an ARPA report. Is there more to talk about with ARPA? Okay. Then do we want to at least introduce this broadband policy, or is it better for a later time? Apparently, we drafted a policy statement at least in order to get the grant.
Right, that was a component of it, and so Monique and the group put together that, and it was in there, it was included when she submitted the grant. So at some point, we would look to eventually get a policy approved. And so I think that's a component that will drive what some of those things are that are done within this effort, so.
Well, I think it's really great that, that you got that draft out and we have copies. If that is likely to perhaps grow and morph a little bit as this plan develops, just help me out, Monique and City Manager, is it better to kind of everybody hang on to it for reference if we want to look at it, or is it something we need to spend time on today?
Madam Chair, I would definitely say that you keep it for reference for the future. I think especially after I have the initial meetings with KHF to see if there are any other requirements, I could keep you informed of that. But I think we just use it right now as a working document
Okay,
and revise it as necessary.
all right. Thank you. Lizone?
Zone again. I appreciate holding it back for reference, but I think that I'm not sure exactly what more can be added to it, as it is an administrative policy. It's not a 22-plus page digital equity or strategic plan, which I think a comprehensive plan, which I still think is needed. But I hope that what we have here, which I think is very, very good, can be eventually adopted or approved by the City Council, whatever that formal process is, and that this be added to the broadband section of the Consolidated Action Plan, because there is a segment there for broadband. Because in 3 to 4 years, not everybody may be here, and there may be new people, and things may come up. And a lot of times, things such as the grant was contingent on the city having some type of a policy. Sometimes the monies that may come available at the federal level will be contingent on if you have an approved administrative policy, even if it's not a strategic plan. Having read this here, I believe it gives a good vision of where it goes, and I'm hoping that the city can be submitted, discussed, and eventually passed so we can get this done and out of the way.
And I will tell you that I'm comfortable with that, but part of a reservation that I have, and we just covered it a little bit by you listing off everybody else who was on your committee, makes me nervous for the city to be the only one that has it. To me, we should all be co-signing on to a shared broadband policy, or should be adopting maybe identical or customized ones, so that it's clear that we have a partnership that is strong. And within that, what's emerging is who the leader would be, if there is one, or whether it is literally a collaborative. There's structure matters, and we have done a wonderful job of getting this whole thing going. But
I just think that the administrative policy is really just putting the city of Topeka on the map, saying we support digital equity in Topeka. That bigger plan is really more of a strategic equity plan, and I think that that's going to be more than 2 or 3 pages. And that's really where that input from
Absolutely.
that group can really come in. I've given my examples of them. I've shared samples of them. I've never seen one that is less than 22 pages. That is something that's a little bit more comprehensive, that brings in the voices of the workforce centers and other strategic partners. And I think that part of that can come out of that Digital Equity Summit. But this right here is just really an administrative policy that really identifies that the city is committed to digital equity on behalf of the citizens in the city. It's not telling exactly what's going to happen and what's going to be made available, but it's saying that the city is supportive of this. This is something that, you know, is a little bit more active than the studies and reports that we have paid for that's just collecting dust, you know. So I just want to encourage not to wait too long, but to get this, you know, passed and to have it a part of, you know, written up into the consolidated plan. Because there is a page on there for broadband, very short, very brief, but if it shows that, you know, that the city, you know, is going to be driven, that's part driven by the City of Topeka Digital Equity Inclusion Administrative Policy, I think that that will be appropriate, and if there's anything that needs to be added or amended to it, fine. If the discussion comes up now amongst city council members and questions asked that maybe we should add something else into it, I think that would be great. But I wouldn't want to get this confused with the comprehensive
No,
community-based
absolutely not.
equity plan.
Yeah. Mike?
Mike Siebert, DCF again, Regional Resource Coordinator. Councilwoman Alcala had mentioned different languages, especially Spanish. There is a program called 1-800-CHILDREN, and that program, if and when this is totally free to parents and with children and with families, they will allow such information to be on their website. And the best part about it is it can not only be just English or Spanish, there's like 250 different languages that can be accessed through that website. And it can talk about what's available, what's not available, as far as, and where to find those resources. So 1-800-CHILDREN.
Wow,
Thank you.
thank you. So if, as long as the children call up, if they've got grandparents that,
The parents can do a website on their
Okay.
phone.
awesome. So they post the various documents and that gets it in the system? Is that how that works?
It's an avenue where just about anything that a child needs, anything from a parent who has a crying baby at 2 in the morning and just needs someone to talk to, they can call or make that contact. But it can also be resources that those parents need. And so internet is definitely a resource that they would need for their kids. And so if a parent is tied into that, which DCF is really pushing that right now, for them to have that access, they can look, and when you talk about marketing, this is just one more avenue that they can look and go, oh, I didn't realize that we could get this. You know, you can do the TV, you can do the different things, but if it's in this venue as well, and it's free. So,
Very
might
good.
help.
Thank you. All right, anything else for broadband this morning? Megan, no nuggets? All right. Keeping her hand in. Thank you for coming and thanks for all you're doing. Okay, well, we will wrap up broadband then for this particular meeting and move on to property and premises. Thank you all for coming. You're welcome to stay, or we understand if you're going to go on about your business. All right. Liz, have you heard from Neil?
Yes, she did. Yeah, he's stuck in a work meeting and will
Okay.
join when he can,
Okay,
but he'll join by Zoom.
okay, thank you. That word was that Councilman Dobler has been tied up in a meeting. He will join by Zoom if he can before the end of this meeting. So moving on to property and premises, just as a refresher, at our last meeting on July 8th, The committee adopted a preliminary recommendation with simply 2 amendments, largely on the assumptions and the aspirational goals and the 4 challenge areas that we've been talking about since November. What happened then was that the staff was given a week or so to turn in a response, and we did receive that on time on the 22nd, 23rd of July. So now have that in front of us, and this is an opportunity for then the staff to perhaps present some of that. Our 2 items today are to have those staff responses and any discussion, and then for our committee to affirm and set next steps. The idea here being that what we've got is a preliminary recommendation to put out for public comment and then loop back around in this committee to have a final report and recommendations to the council. So we now have a staff response which can stand alone, or if in some discussion today the staff wants to modify that in any way, then we will go out to hearings for feedback from the public. And as far as I'm concerned, those will be hearings not to talk about what the problems are, but how we can collaborate and move to yes for solutions on the challenges that we've mutually agreed on. So with that, Brent, Mike,
Thank you, Chair.
welcome Mike Haugen as
Thank
well
you.
from Code.
So what I prepared for you, I wrote the memo that you received, provided from information that I was provided by Mike Haugen and some of the discussions we've had with Lieutenant Andy Badel. And so provided that information, tried to summarize basically what some of the primary issues that we've identified, some examples of issues that we're encountering, ways that we can make some slight modifications to programs. As was mentioned to me after receiving this, that there are some items that, are going to require action steps by staff in order to look at campaigns to get the word out on various areas that we're trying to impact. There'll be some other action steps that may be required, policy changes, maybe even ordinance changes. So there are some steps that would occur. We'll likely see those occur after you've made your final decisions, after you've conducted your public meetings and so forth. If there's more detail that you're looking for, I think that that's something that we need to know. If there's, we know the programs and how we manage them, but it may not tell you all of that in this document. It really wasn't intended to go that deep, but simply to how we would attack some of these issues, and identify and call out where some changes that would be occurring or that have already been modified on how we do business that maybe are recent. Taking, for example, the vacant property registry is a recent change in how we've done it. And I say recent within the last 4 to 6 months. So that's kind of where I left the level of the document. And so would obviously any feedback that you would give, we would be welcome to receive. We're trying to balance what we can do with our staff, with the laws, to eventually accomplish the goals that you've espoused to. Realizing that some numbers we're still struggling a little bit with regarding how many, for example, substandard houses do we have. I think at the end of the day, what's most importantly is we identify exactly what we're saying is a substandard house, and then from there, what we can accomplish on how many we address, and deciding exactly where we started from may not be the easiest thing, but we can say how we're progressing. So I'll leave it at that, and Mike and I are here to answer questions.
Okay, just for those who are watching who don't have documents in hand, this is let's see, it doesn't have page numbers, but I think it's about an 11-page document.
Yes, it is.
So it is fairly detailed. Councilwoman, do you have any specifics, questions?
Well, I would like to know, maybe I'm overlooking it. We had agreed that the There could be a time study done.
Yes.
Is
And
that
that I
supposed-
didn't address that here. It's on my to-do list to have that done, to work with staff, but I didn't include it in this document.
Okay,
no.
because it wouldn't be the place to have it
Right.
in here.
Yeah, I
right?
wouldn't. I wouldn't view it to be. I would say that, however, as you go through the discussion, if that becomes an item we can establish. We have done an RPI process on, for example, it was the sanitation abatement, process, notification, abatement, go through the whole process. And so we've done a pretty good study on how long it takes and what the steps are. But we need to do that for all of the components.
So, and when you do that study, do you bring in an outside entity, or you don't have them, the employee do it themselves? It's
No,
being
I think
time
that,
studied.
well, as far as the time study, there are two different time studies that were talked about. One was, how long does it take us to go from point A, identified, notice needs to be sent, to completion of the issue. The other one that we're looking at is our time study, is what our staff does throughout the day, and analyzing how our procedures, what takes the most time and so forth. So I hadn't really thought from the process as whether it would be an outside consultant, and who would do that, but I know that that would be an option,
Would
definitely.
somebody from the engineering department
Possibly,
do it?
yeah. I'll have to investigate, but yes, somebody else can surely help us with that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Karen. Chair.
I had a number of very specific questions that I don't know that need to be, maybe just to sit down with you guys in terms of clarifying there, anything from where the reference is to tenants rather than occupants on structures. This makes reference to the vacant structures ordinance, yet we're kind of underway on just the way it's identified in here. I think if I couldn't figure it out, maybe somebody else won't be able to figure out exactly where you were going with it as well.
Yeah, maybe verbiage. I mean, we try to keep it simple
Yeah.
so that it's obvious, but if there's some verbiage I've used that is maybe more internal verbiage we use that wouldn't be as obvious, we can call that out and see if we can do a better job of explaining it.
It might be just as easy to do a sit-down because there's just lots of little pencilings.
Sure.
But, even in terms of saving money for the department and having efficiencies, the issue that we really haven't talked about much here, especially now that there's apparently a senior inspector involved, the administrative hearing officer role was added really not that long ago, at least for me. And how many layers of appeals we have. It looked like you were envisioning giving the inspectors themselves a little more authority for extensions, but it wasn't really clear. Those were the kinds of things, as I was reading what the response was, I thought, okay.
Well, and I think that's definitely come up, given where our staffing level is right now. We have to do that, or otherwise we'll become bogged down.
Sure.
And as long as an individual's making progress, and noticeable progress, then I think that's our desire, because as you've mentioned, we want to seek compliance, and whether it's from the individual or from a neighbor that's helping them or whatever, that's our ultimate goal. So, but obviously, with John's position, that's helped a lot, hasn't it, Mike?
Absolutely. It's neutralized right now because of staffing, because he's just in the field filling in. So he's, but for consistency and following policy, when he goes to all the warrants, make sure everything's done correctly, because it makes a big difference to have him.
Because it used to be that, this is years ago now, you know that. Sorry, I go way back. But, the inspectors had the ability to write and the notices, of course, and with the appropriate, had the discretion to give the full amount, but also, for instance, on a renter-occupied property, we didn't give more than 30 days, and then they could give less than that if it was more immediate, like no heat or something like that, which you all have. But then they pretty much worked with the properties. If there was an appeal, it went to to the department head or to the division supervisor, and then over that person, it stayed in the department, but it was just done administratively with staff. And so it's just interesting to me. I didn't know whether, as we look at this, looking at how many layers we have for appeals and all that time, we're doing better with that. I think people are able to Zoom now instead of have to take off work or come in live, or do they have to come in live for housing court?
They're coming in live unless
Okay.
they just can't make it. Somebody from California is not going to have to come live.
Okay. Well, I can sit down with you. The other thing I did, which I had shared with city manager, was to sort of look through and identify which of the recommendations you were making were policy changes, because it'll help us to kind of list those out if that's what we're going to do. Probably not till after the hearings and some feedback from citizens, but I'd kind of like to see the policy changes and any campaigns or things like that identified, so we've got a more concrete list to a takeout list to work from, possibly even having those policy changes, for instance, on the vegetation, to decide, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to have a different interpretation of what we've already got on the books, or do we need to amend it and just get those things done
Right.
when it goes forward to the
Yeah,
to
we'll
the council?
need to work with legal and figure out, based on what you're looking to accomplish, whether it requires an ordinance change or it simply requires a change in how we view it. If the
Yeah.
ordinance is sufficient as it's written. and
Exactly, those
how-
kinds of things, so
yeah.
we don't beat those to death. If that's where we're going, then let's figure out some of those things. We can figure out how to get there. And the other thing is that on the campaigns, I think when we take it out to the public, if there are initiatives where we need partner agencies or neighborhood associations to help out and so on, that's an opportunity to kind of lay that out and let people engage. Well, if we don't have more discussion on the city's memo, my thought is that we could spend our time today planning how we want to do those public hearings.
Yeah,
If in
it's-
fact the simple way is to put the committee's recommendation out in front and just ask people to react to those as to whether they support the aspirational goals and the challenge goals, yes, no, or comments and a different idea, and then engage them in how we could achieve those goals, so that the participation is hopefully all constructive and productive to help us move forward rather than rehash old issues. That's one way to do it. If you think that would work, and I'm just going to throw that out there because that document is what we have. If there is a better way to frame out, we had talked about doing a survey also, and as I thought about it, it seemed that whatever we did, we could be the public survey and also the framework that we use in our public engagement live engagements, so that we had sort of a structure to keep notes from and draw that, be able to compile or combine the feedback from. And I am open. Let's just plan those. What I wanted us to do, Ben, today is, if we're ready to move forward, is to plan the structure for that public input and the hearings, and even perhaps identify how and when we want to get out. I put a timeline in the packet so that we could pencil. So first, let's talk framework. City manager?
Well, I think, framework-wise, I think one of the things that it's not going to be able to be avoided, as you mentioned, the problem. I think we're going to hear from the citizens as to how they view the problem. I think that's going to change and be able to be avoided. I mean, obviously, the focus can be, okay, that's the problem. Do you have suggestions? I mean, yes,
Right.
you're bringing the problem forward,
Right.
but try and focus back to, do they have any suggestions that they feel would make a difference in how we're handling it as a city?
Right.
And I think that's going to be part of the framework that we need to incorporate in whatever we do, is that whoever's moderating that discussion and present in that environment's going to need to try and shift it back to, okay, we hear you. You don't have enough time to do the work that's required. Okay, but we want to try and get accomplished tasks and cleanup versus the amount of time that we're allowing.
Right.
So looking at that, I think that that's going to be critical in the framework for the,
So we need to introduce it clearly.
yes. So when you're bringing up a problem, have your own suggestion as to how it might be fixed. And they may not have an idea, but let's not harp too much on the problem.
Exactly. One of the ones, for instance, I've been through recently, as Mike knows well, but with a neighborhood that was one of the targeted neighborhoods for paint. And it's worth a conversation, whether, how the notices would go, if they're going to go out in February.
Yeah,
I have
and that's-
explained I understand both sides of it. On the one hand, you give this short notice and everybody just panics. But talking with Mike and his staff about how successful it's been, I mean, I've explained to people that are upset that on the other hand, there are people that if you don't kind of shake them awake, they don't move. And so whether, nonetheless, because house painting is so huge, whether a year out is better than 90 days to get people going if there's an equally successful way that wouldn't be as jarring as it is to many.
Yeah,
And I don't know.
We've seen successes. I mean, some people say, oh, I didn't know. I mean, I was thinking about doing it anyway, but now that you sent me a notice, I'll make sure. And I think one of the things that's happened is painting is that particular subject, it's a hard one because there's a limited number of available contractors. And then if you're sending a notice to somebody, not everybody can get out and paint their house. And then you add, if it's a 2-story house, then you're adding more complexities to the situation. And so, but I think a lot of times that in that one, we tried to just say, okay, if you can show you have a person that's going to do it, and
Right.
you have a contract, then we'll wait, because ultimately we want you just to paint the house. Right?
But I've had some people that didn't get that response at first. Maybe they would now. But, because why would we want to spend the time of an administrative hearing officer dragging somebody in when they had a contract in March and the guy just couldn't get out?
Yeah, so those
Something
I
like
think
that.
are good discussions to have during these types of meetings as to
Uh-huh.
how we want to see it handled in order to get efforts completed to improve neighborhoods rather than letting it drag on and on and on.
Well, and one of the places I want to either have one of the neighborhood-based hearings in that neighborhood or make sure they're invited, because I've challenged them, because they know, when you get enough back and forth, that most everybody's going, we really did need a little facelift. This is probably not bad. But then an individual at the moment is struggling with that. And so whether there's really a better idea or not is worth hearing out from people. Maybe they do have a better
And
idea.
unfortunately, when we're sending a notice, and Mike's one of his guys is sending a notice, we don't know each individual person's situation.
Exactly.
And that can hit them wrong. And never intended that way. We're simply trying to do our job.
Exactly.
Mike's
And
guys are talked about that's what they need to do, is cite people that are in violation, not just
Right.
look the other way. And so sometimes we end up catching people at a bad moment in their life. And
But I've had enough neighborhoods that have been through that at this point, and some of them were early ones, so I'd have to dig back on it. But whether, for instance, in the neighborhood that I'm talking about from this year, they're far enough down the line now, and they're good people, and in my experience, they generally are. It's like, well, it was awkward to see whether they'll say, it was awkward at the time, but maybe that was the best way to do it, and we look better, or whether, because they can resolve it out themselves too, and I'm just eager to hear and let them engage.
And that's what will be happening at these meetings.
Yes.
You're saying.
That's what I hope. Yeah.
But wanting to hear their suggestions.
yeah, and then we can fold that in with what staff
Exactly.
can do, can't do, and then determine, we'll determine how to move forward.
And I don't mind, for instance, the counterpoint of, well, I hear you, and it was rough on you, but we all know that some other people need kind of a jolt, and get people to react to that. Yeah.
So, will this be a part of a slide presentation where instead of all this verbiage that we're looking at right
Oh, we
here?
can do
Like,
whichever way you want to try and
really?
approach the opening
Well,
of it.
I'm just impressed with those 3 slides that we're using on the revenue neutral
Mm-hmm.
rate and how easy those were, to understand. And we
Right.
could get this broken down into something that changes, like where we
Oh, yeah,
were
well,
then,
I
and
think-
this is what we're going to look like
Yeah,
now.
Mike's presentations he did a year ago related to each of those components that we focus on, which are primarily our housing structure issues that need to be repaired, your junk abatement, weeds, and vehicles, and we can outline very simply the process that's already on the books as to how staff handles those issues. And that could be an opening statement, so to speak. And then work with you all as to establishing slides that show this is how we do the process, but these are the aspirational goals that we have for our community. Understanding these are the basics of how we implement that, but these are the goals that we want to see move forward. But we can work with you to establish whatever presentation.
That's a
you
really
want.
good, that's a really good point. I'm thinking if what we want to do is focus on what the committee put together, and Mike did a great job with the slides, but so if the goals for property and premises, this is what we're about, operations wise, this is how we want to do it. We note that there's other departments, not just code compliance, then the aspirational goal. Does this make sense to you? Now, that would just be words. But then, rather than all this other,
But we can keep
and I'm
it
just
very
thinking out loud.
bullet.
But the 1, 2, 3, 4 challenges, we have language on here, but we could just lay out the goal with a picture. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, or something basic that they can look at and understand.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that the presentation that I had brought here, and you said it needed to wait till a later time. Remind me again when we can take a look at some of those newer ideas about possibly considering if there's the appetite for.
I think that's
Bringing it
now.
forward.
I think you brought that before. Have you all looked through that? Was that something you considered?
You had sent an email with different departments, and I can't find it. I dug through my emails and I can't find it.
Okay, I'll resend it today.
No shame, always ask for resend.
Yeah. Well, I'd start questioning if I ever saw it. That's what-
Oh.
Was that just in my mind, or did she actually send something?
Well, or sometimes I get stuck because maybe somebody sends it through Liz, and so I'm looking
Sure.
for their name, and instead I should have looked for Liz
that
or
might have been
Mike
exactly what
or
happened.
all those things too.
So if you're saying this is the time, then.
think so.
When would that time exactly be as we're going?
Well, we can figure out what our first one is and then
Tie it
backtrack
in with
from
that.
that.
Well, and what I had thought was rather than burden, some people just want to go and have their say. Some people want to do that deep dive. So if we created whatever the target space would be on the city's website, let's say, with links, so that our document was posted, your document was posted, all the minutes, if somebody wants to look at all those slides that we did for the last year and a half from you, that all that stuff, your slide decks would all be available. And I think they all probably already are, but to simply, as we put that out to the public, to say, here's what I want to talk with you about. But if you want to do as much deep dive as you want into what we've talked about to get to this point, it's all there, and have it conveniently together. And I don't see why Christina's slide deck couldn't be with that too.
Yeah, we'd reduce it down because you don't want everything in it, but
Well, I mean, if that's a link to somebody's
presentation.
a presentation,
Yeah.
right? And so if they want to look at it, fine. I mean, then we might have other people. I mean, and I'm just thinking out loud here. Susan McClarty, who's chairing the CAC right now, is just a real student of Bill Barberg's and watches a lot of the podcasts that he does, and often shares the ideas if she thinks they're useful. I mean, if other people had links to articles or things like that they wanted to send in, it's just as convenient to just share them with everybody if somebody has them, right?
Okay.
Same for you, Mike, if there's presentations from those professional meetings or things that you've been at. I can't guarantee anybody to look at all of them, but at least we'd have one place to park them if people did.
Well,
This
it'll
is
take-
just so important to so many people, but in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I imagine if we want to put that stuff on a website, we better have a couple of weeks to pull all that from everybody together.
well, Liz, you have the things like the minutes and all those
Yeah.
already.
But I
and-
think part of it is just getting it all together. That'll be a new page, getting with our third-party vendor that does our website to
Oh, I see.
create and fill it all in. And I'd want a couple weeks before I'd say it's going to go live.
Well, we probably, if we can set the calendar of how we want to see the timing go and maybe how many of these input sessions we'll do, realistically, we need a couple weeks out to let people know we're going
Right.
to do it anyway, so that would all work.
So, I mean, maybe, at least till the 2 weeks from now, the 15th of August, before
Which,
we're...
interestingly enough, I'm proud to say is what I had on our,
Yeah, I know, but I mean, that would be when we would produce that and then allow probably a couple of weeks. Plus, with the environment we're in right now, where we would do those, we're gonna have to make sure that it's a large enough facility. And it might require some registration of some sort for people to be able to manage the numbers, depending on where we're at.
well, the thought that I'd had was that if we did, thinking of hearings we've done before, if we did 2 live hybrid Zooms
Sure.
here, so that people could come live if they wanted, but they could also Zoom, and we did one in the daytime and one in the evening, then that ought to handle people that wanted to come to a kind of a citywide public meeting. And then if we wanted to take it out into the different sectors of town, now, if we wanted to move even the host site for those hybrid ones elsewhere, we could. But then if we wanted to take it out into neighborhoods, or we wanted to send out a survey, we could kind of decide how many and where and so on.
So did you want to try and do your 2 initial hybrid Zoom meetings before or after Labor Day?
Well, again, I had just kind of plugged in, and it might be too ambitious. Partly depends on whether, if we're going to do 6 of them, if we're all going to be at all of them as a committee, and whether we want to just crunch them all into 10 days and get in and get out and move on, or whether we want to stretch them over a period of time, and I really had no idea what the committee's preference might be. So I just plugged a possible window of the 15th of August to the 10th of September, but whatever, I just wanted to get us started.
Yeah, I just thinking that if we're going to create the web page and have it available, and then start advertising that the meeting's coming, I don't think you want to go with a meeting 2 weeks prior to that. I mean, you want to allow 2 weeks to go from when you get it published and start asking and making people aware of the meeting. I think you want to wait at least 2 weeks before you
Okay.
have a meeting. So then
So the
that
end of
almost, that
August?
then pushes us right before Labor Day, or we could go,
Just do them
Right
the
after.
month of September.
Yeah.
We give that, makes
Yeah.
sense.
It still may
I'm
be
trying
a
to
little
push it
bit-
because I want to make sure we get done before
Yeah,
the
yeah,
end of the
no,
year,
well,
but there's slack
us
in
too.
what I put down.
us too, we've
That
been,
would work better for me, the month of September.
Month of
than
September?
Putting August into it, it would be rather intense for me.
yeah, and we're still dealing with the budget, but hopefully 7th, we're done. Everything goes well. So then,
Well, and it's this return to school transition
Yeah.
time for a lot of individuals and
Right.
families and so on. It would give us a chance if
Okay.
we set this
Well-
agenda to even put it
Yeah.
out through the CAC, not only at the August, but the September meetings, and just let people know what we're
Well-
planning.
Let's see. September 8th is a JADO meeting. 7th is council meeting. 9th is Landmarks Commission, but Landmarks has been meeting by Zoom. So, you could look at 9th of September for your two Zoom hybrid meetings. There's a good chance that this room might be available on the 9th. I'm just
I was
throwing that out
thinking
there
we'd
for a
probably do
date.
different days of the week
Okay.
as well. Just, I think of people's schedules, and when, all the times they say, well, I couldn't come, it was all on that one day and I was out of town or I had to
Right.
work or whatever. But we will have those individual if we go out into the neighborhoods as well, unless there's a sense that somebody from outside that area wouldn't be welcome, but I would think most of our neighborhoods would be accommodating to somebody who just randomly wanted to come to theirs because they
Sure.
couldn't come to the big one.
Well,
Do you?
I mean, pick a date and I can tell you I have most of the meeting type things that might interfere with or conflict from the city side. Obviously, I don't know your personal schedule, but
Give some preferences.
Just not Mondays.
Okay.
I could do Monday a daytime, but evenings.
I worry about Mondays just because people miss it on their calendars, but maybe I'm wrong a lot of times. That's why Mondays are open.
Fridays are worse.
Fridays are worse. And of course,
Unless it's
Tuesdays
in
and
the
Wednesdays and
morning.
Thursdays are full.
Unless it's in the morning. Friday mornings are okay. Friday
Yeah.
afternoons.
For those who want daytime, do you think morning would probably be best? So like a 10 o'clock in the morning one day, and what time for an evening?
I'm 6.
6 is pretty common these days.
But not on a Friday. You're not going to get 6 o'clock on a Friday. You're not going to get people.
Oh, I understand. You and I both know that.
Especially with school starting. because-
No, I wasn't thinking,
Wednesday, Thursday.
I thought you guys were talking about Friday morning better than,
Yeah, Friday mornings at 10 is probably good.
but a weekday morning might be just as good for that.
Liz actually has the calendar for this room pulled up. She just
Okay.
informed me the 9th is not a day that will work. There's training in here all day.
Okay. What about the middle week?
The 13th through the 17th week.
Uh-huh.
Liz, wait, what can you see?
Step up.
Might just be easier this way. Okay.
And I know Neil travels, and so we'll want to double check with him before we finalize.
Okay, September 13th, the holiday room looks open.
That's the Monday.
You said not Mondays, though. Is that daytime and evening?
I can do morning.
Okay. Oh, I can do Monday morning, the 13th also. Yeah, we have to figure out how to phrase this in the promotion so it looks
We'll work
open
together
and
on that.
simple. Get-
We'll work together on that.
Okay. And then So is there an evening that same week, Liz?
Let's look here. You were thinking 6 to 8 p.m. for an evening?
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like Wednesday the 15th would be okay. Or Thursday would be okay.
I'm not sure my neighborhoods are maybe ever going to start meeting again, so.
Or Friday, but I don't know you'll
No,
get much
no.
on a Friday night.
Wednesday or Thursday, either of those?
I'm good with either of those.
Okay.
Sounds good.
My Canwood group has their meeting with their CPO on Tuesday. So, let's do Thursday. The
16.
Thursday's the 16th and Monday is the 13th. Okay,
What was the time for the morning?
10
10, okay.
and 6 the evening. And then I want to do, I probably literally can't handle more than doing one in District 1, but I want to do one at the neighborhood level. Then I invite just central neighborhoods, just to change the venue a little bit for them.
Well, maybe you could make your own research on what day in the neighborhood works the best.
I think so, and I
publish
can
that
take
and verify it
responsibility
with-
for that,
with-
So are you saying grouping your NIAs together
yeah.
and just having one big meeting in the
I
centralized
think so.
area?
Have one of them host it is what I'm thinking. But we had talked about going to the 4 quadrants of the city, so I want to make sure as a committee today, we decide how many of those we're going to try and do.
Well, I don't know, just a suggestion, you may only need to do a couple. And if you determine that you have neighborhoods that you feel like you didn't touch, or, based on, if you have the 2 that you have planned for entire city, and then you do 2 in your neighborhoods, I'm assuming Councilwoman Valdivia Acla was talking about one in her neighborhood and one in District 1, that might be enough, I don't know. And
It
then-
might be, and I could probably, now that you say that, when I reach out to mine, I can say, we're going to do these 2 public ones. I'm happy to do one in your neighborhood. What do you want? And see what they say.
Well, so we know 1, 2, and 3 have the highest number of
Right,
issues. So what's,
yeah, we
You
may
could do 'em
accomplish,
If you want to do one in North and Oakland or whatever you want to do, really.
well, I mean, what's happening in East Topeka? I only have a tiny section of East Topeka.
Well, so if we want to make sure we do one in East Topeka / Highland Park,
Okay,
for sure.
okay.
So,
That would be one of the quads, east, right?
uh-huh.
We should get ice cream after this is all over, that's what.
Each time, more people would turn out.
No, I'm just talking us.
We like G's ice cream in everybody around 6th and Lane.
Okay, so 4 quad, East Topeka, Highland Park.
Yes, we definitely.
And
Have to be
then,
vanilla with chocolate chip, though.
no, we don't do that.
Hey, wait a minute, brown bread. People have their favorites,
Cheesecake.
Uh-oh.
So, and then I would bring all my NIAs and then just figure a central location for
You'd
them.
figure out
Okay,
yours.
got
Uh-huh.
it. And we,
And do we want to go southwest? I mean, Neil is down there, of course, but we could
ask him.
yeah, I think just ask, because I think there's a good chance that those that are concerned about it in some of those other districts will come to the main 2, the large 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
Because there may be typically a smaller number of individuals that are concerned about this. And they may look to come to those first 2.
What's interesting is that, for instance, if we start to geographically divide up, there's different issues. For instance, the foreclosures the overgrowth on vacant properties has been more of an issue. It's spotty
Yes.
through like District 7 and 8 than in mine. So there might be, check with Spencer and Neil and see
Yeah.
what they think.
Okay.
We can do that.
Yep.
And we can just play accordingly. In fact, just kind of consulting with our colleagues in those districts makes sense, to get hold of Tony and Mike about, and Sylvia about Southeast. And then Mike kind of bridges into Southwest as well, so 5. Get hold of Mike Lesser as well, just see what they think. Are we still planning to take this to the council on the 17th of August?
So
That's where we left it at the last meeting.
I don't know that you necessarily need to, since it's something that's been initiated by the committee, I guess you could if you wanted to, but you could also write a report and say, these are the steps that we're taking, and just.
No, that was the idea, was
Oh,
that
okay.
we would give them an update from this committee as we transition into this process, that's all.
So, yeah, I mean, if you want to put it on the agenda, I can make sure and do that.
I think,
Of what date?
well, at council meeting on the 17th, just to
August,
brief
yeah.
the council about our progress, and at this point, if we're going to have reached out to them about whether they want to.
Yeah, the 10th is pretty full.
Yeah, because what we had actually on our minutes was the 10th with the 17th as a backup, but I saw that you didn't have us on the 10th
No.
and thought, well, maybe you wanted to
No.
wait till we had this meeting.
Yes.
But I think that will also help promote the hearings by just doing that briefing. All those documents would be on the agenda anyway, for the council agenda that day, so that's another place people would be able to find them, both on the 17th and later, really. So maybe that's where they are. Just send everybody to the to the agenda place. And so we could reach out to our colleagues on the council now to see if they have any particular preference. But again, if we're talking the month of September, if when we do the briefing in August, if somebody gets their wheels turning and they want to do something, they can with us or whatever. Okay. So you all will work on a slideshow?
Yes.
Maybe. Okay.
I'll send the presentation to everybody again.
Okay. Well, if we shoot to get all of those booked before the 23rd, we'd be done before, based on this day of the week and time of the month, I was looking that our next 2 meetings would be the 29th of September and the 27th of October. I don't think we've got calendar invites on those yet, so just making sure that works for people. Looks like we need to bring broadband back, and, I mean, for our agendas, and I don't know if we need to do homeless or not. But, or if we give ourselves the month of September to do all these hearings, I don't know, do you want to meet and wrap it up on the 29th, or skip a September meeting and
We're
go
gonna be
to
really-
October and give time for staff to.
We're really going to be busy.
I think so. That's why I wanted us to calendar it together.
No, I have no problem skipping September.
All right. Is it, from the broadband purpose, is that, or the homeless purpose? Do you see skipping September as a problem for us?
I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Okay. Well, let's keep it all moving and we'll plan to, that'll give us the whole month to stretch those
Right.
neighborhood meetings. Our thought, Councilwoman Valdivia had suggested before that just to make sure that that our colleagues from the council were engaged, that we encourage our colleagues to come to at least one of those hearings, and it seems like that ought to work out.
Yeah.
We can include that invitation when we ask them if they'd like to have stuff hosted in their own districts as well, and just see how it goes. Right, Liz?
Yes.
And are we having an August meeting?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. It's July, right? I was busy
Well, no,
looking
I
ahead.
thought, did I leave a month?
I think you're going to have enough meetings that you're doing here that there's, I mean,
Well, do
you're
we?
committing to a lot right now.
Yes, we
Amen.
are.
And
We
so-
are.
Yes, we are.
So-
And
And I don't know that there's anything that will change between now and the end of
No,
August.
and as far as like, I know that there's been a number of things that have come up at council on, homeless issues, and I'm planning, with other organizations, TRM and Braille, Persinger, et cetera, to have community meetings
okay,
in District 2. So
okay, yeah, you're
that can
hot
be.
heavy in that.
Yeah, that can be maybe something before the end of the year, can be brought forth here, because there needs to be discussion on it, in my
Okay.
opinion, and in District 2's opinion.
So the broadband folks are working on rolling out the plan that they've got and getting their hiring done, getting their people on board. You're working on the homeless issues that are in Oakland especially, and
Yeah.
working with these new ideas and initiatives that are moving down the line.
Yes.
We're getting ready to spend September on these hearings, and so the thought is that we can focus on, so we'll present to council on the 17th. We'll get all this stuff in order and do six hearings in September. So
So no August
plan
or
to have a
September.
meeting. Do we want to wait all the way till the 27th of October then, or do we want to back that up a little
I would
earlier in
back
the
it
month?
up earlier.
So get that calendar still going for this room? Maybe something more like the 5th, what would it be? The 13th of October?
What's that follow?
That's a Wednesday morning again. That's sticking with the Wednesdays at 10, but getting it a little sooner.
Okay.
How does this room look?
Oh, it's taking a minute for it to pull up.
Okay. Okay. I'm really good with the ice cream idea.
I'm just joking.
It's custard.
Oh, that's gross.
That's true. Obviously a connoisseur.
The room is open 10 to noon
Yeah.
on the 13th.
All right. Let's do that then. No 29th. I hadn't even contemplated one in August, so forgot about that. And we'll go with 10/13. And that will be likely what I had stubbed in on here for the discussion, set up, plan of action, and so on, so, well. Because truthfully, if we're, it's kind of up to you all, the more we have thought through what those campaigns might engage so that we can engage the public with them, the better. And the more you've drilled down on which policy approach you want to take, the more firm that can be, so we can just roll it out. I'm thinking about the vegetation one that we just talked about, for instance. It's kind of up to you to figure that out.
I can tell you I'm limited on any campaigns right now with my staff. I'm 503 cases.
That's exactly the
backlog.
point. We're needing to
I can't.
talk to the city manager about his community engagement staff or community others, neighborhood groups and community groups that can help with the initiatives. It's not, it can't be just you.
No.
And we've known that all along.
Chair, I have a question. How many staff are you short?
I'm short 3 inspectors, so almost 50%. And when you go 3, plus then you throw in illnesses and all the things that are going on, I'm at 50% every day. Less than 50% today. So I got 503 cases that are due for inspection today. We can't do
But
it.
the issue is, we're going for yes, and we've known all along, using that as an example, that you need your inspectors to inspect, but the more we can streamline your routines, the more we can get community engagement to just cleaning this stuff up without you having to inspect it at all. And, if we're gonna do vegetation campaigns, it's gonna be somebody else. So we have to lay that out so that we're gathering interest and I've been pushing, for instance, Leslie. I said, we're probably gonna need you guys, the Shawnee County Extension, to help with those kinds of things. And
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things right now with we're just focused on trying to keep things going, that Mike's, and
absolutely.
hopefully it'll get better. We'll get some people hired and trained and
Yeah, and so we're not trying to roll you over, we're trying to look ahead. That was how we got into this anyway at the time when you were fully staffed and we weren't in COVID. So trying to not burden you with that, for sure.
okay, some work to do.
All right, well, I think that's, we can certainly communicate with one another, just informally, in terms of shaping up exactly how that invitation might look and what the questionnaire might look like and so on. So if we're giving ourselves basically a 2-week deadline to get all that together, that will work. That would be the,
Yeah, I think right now I'm going to focus on just the invitations for the first 2 hybrid Zoom meetings because we don't know location or day.
well, we'll copy it, we'll.
Yeah.
Yeah, once we've got the format and if we were gonna put a survey online so that if people want, correspondingly, if we give them the questions that we're gonna use, then if people wanna just send in comments, they can to. That's where they can write the novels, if they choose.
So September 13th and 16th.
Yeah, so 2 weeks is the 11th, then we'll have everything figured out before we do the briefing to the council. That'll work.
The 11th? This 2 weeks?
Well, 2 weeks from today is the
Okay.
11th
Got it.
to get our stuff ready.
Okay. You did that on purpose.
Let's see where my, here it is. Oh, just to clarify, Liz and I had exchanged some points on planning this agenda. The thought would be that, of course, the 2 sessions that are in this room would be hybrid. But we would not make that attempt with the neighborhood-based meetings. Just go live. Right? Okay.
Very difficult to.
Just want to make sure. With 2 of these available, hybrid and at different times, then it should provide the alternative. Just making sure. And And when we get the comments back from the hearings and any responses that people email in, who will collect and sort those? Will that be you guys? Will it be Liz? Just so we know.
We'll talk.
Okay.
Liz and I'll talk. I'm
All right.
probably want to look to use Liz to help on that. I'll probably look to use Liz to help on that.
If she's got time, if she doesn't.
Yeah, we'll,
You know, I don't know if you want your community engagement people to be involved in helping to get
good
the
chance
word
they'll
out
need to
and
be
support.
involved as well, yes.
So that would be good.
I don't know what the survey looks like, though. That's going to be the harder. I don't have that done. So.
Well, again, it's whether we simply take this document that we have and just say, do you agree, disagree, have some suggestions? That's a real simple way to do it. If on looking at it, it's like too open-ended and it's like, no, there'd be a better way. I'm not sure what that is.
I think, yeah, the harder, well, I guess, yeah, we're just looking for comment, not necessarily a scientific survey.
Correct.
So we can
You know,
put
sort
that
of,
out.
so, I mean, when you look at what we put out as a committee, if there's an agreement that these are the goals of the department, or no, we think it should be something else, that's easy. Kind of softball ones, but if they have other ideas for.
It's just very open-ended.
One of the things I ran into when just talking about this with a couple of key people was, for instance, when it says reduce the current, if challenge number one is reduce the current substandard structures by 50%, just as has happened here, the individual said, well, what number are we starting with? So we may need to be prepared to use numbers instead if that's just too open-ended. But if we leave it exactly the way it's phrased, then people can ask those questions. They can talk about what they consider substandard. You know, there might be some sub-questions that we want that feedback on. Reducing deterioration in vacant structures. We did an awful lot of work on that and do have a suggestion. If we leave it just at that question, might not be enough. So kind of think through how it would look.
Okay.
All right. With that, we've got our plans, we've got our agenda. Had some really great stuff on broadband at this meeting, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I'll stop it in a minute.
Okay.